All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to White Collar Week's Tuesday night speaker series. Our guest speaker tonight is Brent Cassity, one of our favorite people in the world. And he's here, and he's going to tell us his incredible story. I'll tell you more about that in a little while. First, a little bit of housekeeping. First, a plug for our Monday night White Collar Support Group meetings. We've been holding them for 8 years. So in our 9th year, this coming Monday night, March 25th, is our 405th meeting. So we've been doing this for a while. And if you are justice impacted or have a white collar criminal justice issue, either before prison or after, or if not prison, then probation, please join us. You can find our contact information on our website at prisonist.org. That's prisonist like feminist. And we will respond immediately. And we have instant there if you need to reach out to anybody immediately. And it's all there at prisonist.org. And a lot of information about our group. And we hope you will join us on Monday night soon. I'm going to announce 3 upcoming speakers, all in our Tuesday night speaker series. And on Tuesday nights, our meetings are open to everyone. They're open meetings, so you can have family, friends, anybody who'd like to join us on Tuesdays, not on Mondays, but only on Tuesdays. On April 2nd, we have Jason Bowles, a friend. He's a criminal defense attorney in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And he happens to be the criminal defense attorney for Hannah Gutierrez, the murderer in the Rust movie case. So that case has gotten a lot of attention lately. And he's going to take us through criminal defense and what it is to be involved in that kind of case. Certainly with the kind of case within that kind of notoriety. Alec Baldwin's trial is coming up soon. Although there's a lot of post-trial motion practice in that case, including motions for a new trial and an appeal. So there are things that Jason cannot talk to us about, but I think he can give us a lot of the nuts and bolts. And for most of us, it's important for us to learn as much as we can about the criminal justice system. So that's on April 2nd. On April 16th, we have former governor of New Jersey, Jim McGreevey, is going to be our guest. And Jim has led a super interesting life, as most people know, including having been governor of that state and having resigned because of reasons that were pretty well documented last night on CNN, on Jake Tapper's special, which Jim McGreevey was the subject. I'm not going to go into any of Jim's story, but he's going to consent to Q&A too. So that should be very interesting. And then on May 14th, we have our own Michelle Weinstadt Miller, who is on with us tonight right now, who is videoing in from the airport where she's taken off for parts unknown. And Michelle was one of our panelists when we ran a panel at the American Bar Association Criminal Justice Conference in Washington about 1.5 years ago. And she is the general counsel, Fortune Society, which is the largest criminal justice nonprofit in New York City. But she's also served some time at Rikers and is a novelist now with 4 books. Her latest novel is The Lower Power, and I have it around here somewhere. And I really should just hold it up and do a whole book promo. But if I can find it, I will, Michelle. But if not, you can learn more about Michelle on our website. And also Michelle will be our speaker on May 14th. So that is our housekeeping. So I'm going to introduce Brent, and I should say Brent's wife, Julie's on with us tonight, and she's going to be the heckler from the crowd probably. So Brent, you're just going to have to live with that, I guess. So I'm just going to read this. Brent Cassity is an engaging storyteller that has a real-life transformational story. Everyone has built up prisons in their minds. Brent loves speaking to audiences about the 5 strategies he used to survive prison. These tools are excellent to use for your life and business. Brent is the author of the book Nightmare Success, Loyalty, Betrayal, Life Behind Bars, Adapting, and Finally Breaking Free, a memoir. He's the host of the popular podcast Nightmare Success In and Out, which many of us in our support group have been guests on already. And I imagine there's a queue of people to get on it. So check that out. It's on your favorite podcast platform. Yes. He's energized about his new nonprofit reentry company, Nightmare Success Solutions. He was the CEO of Forever Enterprises, a national family company, which he grew from a regional company to operating in 22 states. He's been recognized by a lot of national media, Times, CNN, Fortune, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, and HBO did a documentary about Brent and his family that spawned the popular HBO series 6 Feet Under, which was one of our favorites when it was on. And so Brent has really an incredible story, and we're going to give some time to talk about it, and then we'll do Q&A and or sharing. So after Brent speaks, if you'd like to ask a question or share, put your name in chat and I'll call on you. So Brent, take it away.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted, right?
You are unmuted.
Okay, here we go. Well, I first want to give a shout out to you, Jeff. I really am honored to have the opportunity to speak to this group, and and a big shout out to the group, the White Collar Support Group, because for me, it's been a place where I found my people, my community, and I absolutely love our new tagline. Start here. It's give that to Lynn, who's the better half of Jeff Grant. So what a wonderful tagline that is. Start here, start here. And I thought it's probably appropriate for me I was thinking about am I going to do this at home or should I go to my podcast studio? And I thought, I'm going to go to my podcast studio because this is where, my newfound passion has been. It's a place where I love the platform of trying to find these stories of hope and try to help people get unstuck and giving, hopefully from what they hear, tools. And I thought, well, you know what? I listen and curiosity and all the things that I love about the show. Why don't I just share my story from here? So here I am. And, I was talking to Walt Pavlo a while back. He was on the episode. He's done a lot of speaking, and he said, Brent, you better have a good hook. If you're going to speak, you better have a good hook. I thought about that and I thought, a good hook. And then I thought about this. So I was 15 years old, and I remember we were driving to Marion Prison with my mom and my brother. I remember we pulled into that prison parking lot and there was those eerie scary guard towers on one side. And then on the other side, we were in this prison parking lot where my dad was, the guy that I idolized. And got out of the car, walked up that sidewalk. And, that weird feeling of going into these really uncertain times of going to visit somebody in that type of place. And I remember walking into that prison visiting room at 15 years old and thinking, I hope Dad's okay. And, he came around the corner. It's always weird to see somebody in the prison uniform and the boots and all that, but he was okay. I thought, what, and he put on a good face, and I realized that Dad was going to be okay. But I remember walking out of that prison room, down that prison sidewalk, back to the car, thinking to myself, you know what? This will never happen to me. Regardless of what I do the rest of my life, I'll never find myself someplace like this. This will never happen to me. 38 years later, I'm driving down that same road, pulling into that same parking lot, walking up those same prison sidewalk with that guard tower off in the background. This time I'm going to visit my dad again, who's serving a 10-year sentence. He's about halfway through. But when I walk into the prison room this time, visiting room, I've just finished 3 years of a 5-year sentence at Leavenworth Prison. How in the world did what I say wouldn't happen? Well, it's been quite a journey. And, what I want to talk to you tonight about is how trust can be a comfort or a sword with risk. And I also want to share with you the 5 rules that I use to get through my prison world. And I think they're pretty good life things that you can use for yourself, tools. But before we do that, I want to tell you just a little bit about myself. I've been married for 33 years. I wanted to have Julie on because she's my high school sweetheart, homecoming queen. I married the homecoming queen. She's still the homecoming queen. But I can tell you this, she was a warrior through what we went through as a family. I had 3 incredible, accomplished daughters. They are 31, 29, and 26. And I am the proud grandpa of twin grandsons that are 20 months old, which we just babysat from Friday to Monday. So we were worn out. If you ever feel like you've got it all figured out, go, go babysit twins for 3 or 4 days. They were wonderful. They're such great kids. And as Jeff said, I was the CEO of a national family company. We were kind of known as the disruptors in the funeral industry. We were, Tyler, my brother and I were young kids, and we were turning this 150-year-old industry that hadn't changed much in 150 years on its side by trying to revolutionize the way people remembered a life through technology and doing life stories. We did about 20,000 films, and we had touchscreen consoles on the cemeteries. And the thing that we were always working with is there was an old African proverb that said, when someone dies, the library burns. And so we were wanting to be the library of lives of the community. We had big dreams. And that's how we got into all that fancy stuff in the documentary with The Young and the Dead and that. And I ended up with the tag of, 38224044. So how did it happen? And what happened? Well, let me share with you the day that my nightmare landed on me. And these things usually come to you as a blindside. It did to me. We were having the biggest year our company had ever had. Life was good. Kids were in private schools. My golf game was improving at the club. We were going on great vacations. Second home in Nantucket. The world was at 40 years old, couldn't be any better. I'm filling up at the gas station and the phone rings. And I fumbled it out of my pocket, and I answered it. It's the president of our insurance company. And I'm thinking, this isn't very good because I don't talk to him very much, which is one of my problems that I had. And he says, Brent, I just received the strangest phone call from the Ohio Department of Insurance Investigative Division. This lady said that she has information that's going to bring our company down. And I got to tell you, it sent a cold chill down my spine. And I had felt this feeling before, believe it or not. And I'll have to take a step back in time again to tell you how did I get that feeling before? Well, as a kid growing up, I was idolizing this larger than life dad. He was a D1 basketball player, graduated #1 in his law school class. He won these big cases. He bolted out on the business scene, and he was the guy with the golden touch. All the guys with the big money wanted to invest with him. And, when I was a kid, he was like, Brent, you can accomplish anything. If you just have a plan, you take action. I was like, man, I want to be him. I want to be that guy. At the time, I was a 6'1", 8th grader, which is like a 7-footer in 8th grade. I mean, you could dominate anything when you're that big in junior high. And just like that, one night, everything changed. My dad, after we had dinner, came to us and said, boys, I want to talk to you in the living room. And he said, boys, I've gotten myself into a heap of trouble with the bank I own. And I told the government they could run the government and I could run the bank, and it's gone from bad to worse to talking to you boys tonight. And about that time, he starts talking about that he's going to plead to a deal, a federal deal. And I don't really hear his voice. It's like I can't comprehend the guy that's got the golden touch. The guy that I idolize is telling me that he's going to plead to guilty to a federal crime and is going to go away to prison. And about the time that his voice starts coming back, I hear he says, to get this all behind us, we're going to move to St. Louis. I'm like, man, this is the worst family meeting a kid could have. Everything was wrong. So dad goes to prison. And the weird thing about this is that you moved to St. Louis. I didn't want to move to St. Louis. And I say that, and I'm so many great things happened for me in St. Louis. I met my wife in the neighborhood and all the other great things. But when I moved there, it was so weird because, you know, the wife moves into the neighborhood. She's not divorced. She's not widowed. Where's the dad? There's no Google. So we just decided as a family, we're going to say that my dad was away working. And we kind of felt okay with that because he was, and he was working in the kitchen at the prison. So we just went with that and it worked. And we went and visited every weekend and he came home. When he came home, this dad that I idolized, he hit the ground running. He had one company that survived out of everything that had been lost. And it wasn't a sexy company. It was a company that you prearrange your funeral services. You sell to funerals to people before they die. Idea is that you freeze the price and you get all the information down and it takes the burden off the family. It really did solve a problem. And this company began to grow and I was proud of him all over again. It's like, man, this guy just never gives up. Well, I joined the company 10 years later. It was not my plan A, it was plan B. I was a political science major, theater minor. I was going to be a trial attorney. You know, I just had this all planned out in my head. You know, and I made pretty good grades. You know, I graduated college with a 3.4. I was no 4.0 guy. But I'll tell you what, I had the hardest time with the LSAT and any type of standardized test. I mean, I registered on the dumb scale when it came to standardized tests. And I always blamed it on, well, it's because I'm left-handed, but it's not, because I've run into so many smart left-handed attorneys. So that has nothing to do with it. I just had a hard time with standardized tests. So I had to come up with a plan B. And in the summers, I had worked with sales. And it felt really comfortable to me because, you know, all the sports that I had played, you know, it had a scoreboard. You could play with the big boys if you were good, and you either won or you lost by the sale. So I thought, I'm going to try out the family business with sales, selling prearranged funerals. So I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I'm thinking about, you know, the sales thing, you know, and dad just went, you know, biggest cheerleader, always my biggest cheerleader. Oh, Brent, you'd be great. You do this or that. I said, but Dad, hold on. You carry such a big shadow. Is there anywhere I can go in the company just to pass fail, just be Brent and see if I can do this thing? He said, well, yeah. He said, we just opened up Texas. He said, Austin, we got a funeral home down there to represent. Head down there. I said, I'll take it. You know, a 20-something kid right out of college. I was loving that idea. So I went down there and it worked. And I found out that I was good at it. And, you know, 12 months, I'd grown a big region. We won all the national contests with the divisions and everything. And Dad, he couldn't have been more happy to throw the keys over to this 20-something kid because we had an insurance company at that time that funded these pre-need contracts. I had absolutely no interest in that whatsoever. Again, one of my biggest failures. So we grow, and this thing goes from 3 states, 22 states. And my brother comes into the business, which is Forever Enterprises that I mentioned. And you know, at 40 years old, life was good. And then you get blindsided. And you know, the funny thing is, as the company grew, people would tell me, because we were all in it together, you know, it's funny with a family company, you know, like who's the lead singer in Fleetwood Mac and the Bee Gees and all that. You got to find your way through that. Well, we kind of did. I had my slot with sales and operations. Dad liked the insurance stuff. Tyler was the technology guy. But people would come to me and say, boy, you know, your dad, he really kind of plays in the gray areas sometimes. I said, I know. I said, he's smart, you know, but there was things that we did that in the statutes that he would read something in the statute that no one else had done. So there were some things that we were doing in the company that in our industry, no one else was doing. I looked at that as my admiration, as that, you know what, he's so damn smart that nobody else can figure it out. The other thing is that I think about too is when I look back and reflect on why didn't I ask and do more when I was at the top of the food chain? And I think what the real answer is that I didn't want to mess things up. My life was so good. I had such a great sales national team. I was so proud of the training we were doing. I just figured you'd put the money over there. We got audited every year. We had lots of attorneys. I don't think I need to mess with that. It'd be messy. So that's not a good thing. When you're at the top of the food chain, you need to be making sure that you're watching and doing what you need to do. I had an experience. I had a good friend of mine that owned the largest private insurance company in the United States, and he was going to buy a book of business from us, and he didn't. And we went into other business together. But he came when we were having drinks one night, and he said, "Brent, you never asked me why we didn't buy that book of business from you." And I said, "No." I said, "Michael, why didn't you?" And he said, "Well," he said, "Gary, our CFO said for a company your size, you had too many policy loans." I knew a little bit about policy loans, but not as much as I should have. So I went into our CFO, Randy. I said, "Hey, Randy, this $13 million of policy loans we have, what would it take to wipe that out?" He said, "Well, about $100 million in sales." I was thinking in my head, I was calculating, well, we're going to roll through $100 million in sales. So I left. Now, I never came back to see if we wiped those policy loans out. So the right thing I did was walk into that room and ask about the policy loans. The wrong thing I did is that those policy loans grew and they became part of our nightmare. So when I progressed forward, we had this situation where we had a insurance company that we reinsured out our business. Our reinsurance company was the largest reinsurance company in the world. So we had cut a sweet reinsurance deal, and they came back to us and said, "Hey, we'd like to renegotiate this reinsurance contract." They got a little backwards in the 9/11 market. My dad, being who he was, said, "No, it's not in the contract." Well, arbitration happens. It's common in insurance, but this one was ugly. It started to hit our capital and surplus. It went from 2 million to 4 million to 10 million to 12 million, and it started raising red flags everywhere. We were in 22 states, and there was all kinds of questions. Your capital and surplus is messed up. What's going on? What if you lose this? My dad comes to me and he says, "Brent," he said, "the house is on fire." He said, I can't go speak to these people because of my record, but he said, "I think you'd be really good to do this." And at 40 years old, I thought, man, I would be good to do this. I would thought I was invincible. I put on the cape, show my dad, show the 500 plus people that we had working in our world, save the day. Well, there were times that I thought I had saved the day. There were times that I thought we had just almost bridged it to make it new business plan with Texas, a new thing with Ohio, and whatever. I was running around like a madman. But in the end, I wasn't able to save the day. We lost our companies to receivership that caught the eye of the Justice Department, that started an investigation that was the fight of our lives for the next 6 years. And I look back on it, and it was, it's a blur. But it came down. I had one charge that stuck to me like Velcro. And it was one that the United States Congress had passed in 1994. And it was you cannot allow an ex-felon to work in the business of insurance. I was at the top of the food chain. That one carried a 5-year sentence. The rest of the conspiracy was money laundering, mail fraud, wire fraud, as they all stacked up. When I say stacked up, one night I was drinking too much, looking at these charges, and I started seeing like, what would it be like if I went to trial, and like, how many years could I get? The way that they'd stack those at 10 and 20 years, I was looking at 930 years. That was a lot. And my daughters and my wife came to me and they said, "Dad, this has been a tsunami of bad. There is absolutely no way, would never forgive you if you would ever think that you should walk into a courtroom." And I got to tell you, I knew that already. What had happened to me is that I had gone to bed battling, woke up battling, and that had just become my routine. I had lost everything. I was broke. And I finally realized that it was the end of the road and I was going to have to become a statistic, you know, that 97% that makes that plea deal. So the night before I pled, I'll never forget it. I try to remind myself when I'm having bad times to put myself back into that so I never do that again. We just had a phone call, family phone call. It's a family business. My dad, my mom, Julie, and my brother and me, and we were just talking about stuff. How do we get through this? You know, the girls got college, we get all this stuff, family stuff. We got off the phone and my wife and kids were at our vacation home and I was going to come up the next day because I didn't want them to be here while I was pleading guilty to this. And it was so strange because when I got off the phone, I just hit the total rock bottom of my world that I had never hit before because strangely enough, I had never contemplated the fact that I was going to go to prison. I had never contemplated the fact that I was going to be an ex-felon. Tomorrow, I'm going to do something that's going to put me on that path. And the fact that I hadn't for the last 6 years contemplated what all that was going to mean to me sunk me down into a place I've never been. Drinking alone, playing the night before is not a good combination of things that you should do before you go plead the next day. But I did. I went on a sorry journey. Julie doesn't deserve this. She doesn't deserve the taint of having this. She's been a warrior, such a role model to the girls. The girls don't need this. I'm an ex-felon. What in the world are they going to do? I should be better just to exit stage left, have another drink, feel sorry for myself. Right. I got out a pen and paper and started writing all the great things that Julie had done over all this time. How she'd been this great support, all the fatherly advice I could think of to my girls, all the great support I got from my friends. Poured another drink, grabbed the keys, went to the garage, started the car, and I didn't know if I was going to let the car run or if I was going to go run into a wall. And it was like something hit me. It was like a lightning bolt. I almost feel like I feel it when I'm talking to you about this. It's like, oh my gosh, Brent, holy wow, what in the world are you thinking? This would be the very worst thing that you could ever do. This would be the way that no one would respect. You're the glass half full guy. Your daughters, your wife, your friends, they would all see this as a disaster. What are you thinking? And at that moment, it became so clear to me that there is such a big difference between a victim and a survivor. A victim takes away all your strength. It makes you bitter. You point fingers, you curl up in a fetal position. You can't fight anything. But saying you're a survivor makes you stand up different, makes you sit up different, makes you feel different. And from that moment forward, I knew I was going to survive and I was going to be a survivor and it was going to be different. And I knew that no matter what happened, anything that happened, because there were no good things that were getting ready to happen to me. I was going to go to prison. I didn't know how long I was going to prison. And it was all jumbled up. But I told myself, regardless of what happens to me, I'm going to try to make them proud. I'm going to try to make people respect the way that I'm going through this as a survivor. At that rock bottom moment, it was so different from the fact that I hit that rock bottom moment before I ever stood at the Gates of Leavenworth, which was very helpful to me. Because when I went, Julie and I went the night before to look at Leavenworth, which is kind of a strange thing to do. We were at the top of this place where we could see the people walking the fence and the lights were starting to go on. And I was secretly thinking to myself, my God, Brent, you're going to be in there tomorrow night. And you're not going to be there for just a bad church camp. You're going to be there for 5 years. And that's going to be my world. But I thought to myself, no matter what, I've told myself I'm going to survive. I'll figure it out. So I'm standing at the Gates of Leavenworth. My worst fear has become my reality. How did I survive? Well, I want to share with you the 5 rules that I used to get me through that. And the first one was, and this is kind of, for some people, it's really hard. For others, if you get yourself in a humbled position, like prison, when you get down to just a chair and a locker and a bed, that's pretty humbling. But the first one was to humble yourself. Look around, see who's getting it right. That guy's reading a book I like. That guy's in a workout routine I like. I wonder if I could get that prison job that they've got up at the food warehouse. Start talking to people. How are you doing this? I want to do what you're doing. And it's interesting because I found as a 20-something executive, I would read newspapers and articles and whatever. I'd call the people that were in those. And surprisingly, they would talk to me because I find that people that are getting it right want to share how they're getting it right because they're kind of proud about it. But what it does for you by humbling yourself in your world, asking for help, it gives you the answers to the test before the test. You don't have to reinvent anything. You can find the things that you like and implement into your life and see if they work, but it gets you out of a hole of non-action. Take action with that. You like that? You think that's good? Do that. And it worked for me. The second thing was find your Zewantaneo. I know some of you have to know what the Zewantaneo is. It's in my favorite movie, Shawshank Redemption. Andy Dufresne chips away at his cell wall for 19 years to his freedom. In his mind, his Zewantaneo is the bluest of the blue waters, the whitest of the white sands, that old fishing boat he's going to fix up so he can take his buddies out fishing. And that place on the beach, the old shack that he's going to have fixed up so the guys can watch the sunset and have some drinks. He's chipping away 19 years. Every day he rewards himself with holes in his pocket to let out that wall in the yard that he's keeping on track. Zewantaneo. If you haven't found your Zewantaneo because you say you're too busy or you don't have time, it's the most important thing that any of us can do. Because whether we're going into prison or going out and on our reentry, finding what that is that fills us up allows us to fall into a ditch and get back out. Because we know what our Zewantaneo is. We know what fuels us. If we don't know what fuels us, we can get lost in the ditch and never get out. So I think that's so important to have that, whatever that is. Think about it. Feel it. Feel it. The third one is win the day, one day at a time. Unfair things happen. Move on and make a difference regardless. This was a big one for me. I kept a calendar in prison. And my youngest daughter would make me this calendar every year, and it had our family pictures in it. And my routine at night was I would write in that little box in the calendar, my win for the day. And you're saying, well, how could you have a win for the day, Brent? You're in prison. You can always have wins. Maybe I got forklift certified that day at the food warehouse. Maybe I had a great phone call with my wife or my daughters or whatever that is. You can find that win for the day. Maybe I did more push-ups than I did the day before. I would fill that out. Now, if I had a bad day, especially in prison, I would let myself go all the way down bad. Feel it to my toes, no good, very bad day. I would take it to, I feel so horrible. And I'd write it down. My hack, I would never allow myself to fill in 2 boxes of bad side by side. Reason why, I was scared to death that could fall into a week, a month, a year, and then I'm done. Hope's gone, institutionalized. I lost Brent. Wherever he went, he's out. It kept me grounded to the next day I had to find that win, and I could find it. And I still think that's something that's important when we all deal. I was talking to Myra today. We all find our bad days, even when we got stuff going on good. How do you get out? Find the win the next day. Know that you have to search for that win the next day. When you know you're having that bad day, search for the win the next day so you don't have 2 boxes of bad. Because it's a slippery slope. I was scared to death of a slippery slope in prison, losing me. The fourth one, learn from your mistakes. They don't define you, but they definitely make you wiser. What you do with a mistake makes you a winner or a loser on how you handle it. You know, the trick is to not make the same mistake twice. You know, Jack Nicklaus said you can make a bad golf shot on a hole. Don't make two of them. It really messes up the hole. That's insanity to make the same mistake twice. You can make mistakes, learn from them. It's growth. And we all know because we've all lived it. We're all human. Don't let the mistake curl you up in a cocoon to not step back out and take that step that you need to take the action. That's what makes mistakes terminal. Mistakes can be good. They don't define you. It's part of you. The last one was really a big one for me. Don't give in. Don't give up. Keep being yourself regardless of the circumstances. Otherwise, you will lose what makes you, you. I think the reason why I was so scared of this in prison was I thought somehow that I was going to enter that world and I would just lose me. I'd become prison Brent. And so I remember the night that I was in prison, it was so surreal because, you know, first of all, I got in there and a bunch of people helped me and I didn't expect that. And my bunk mate, Romo, who was a shot caller, he's this little Hispanic guy that was helping me clean out my locker and everything. And I thought, man, I'm going to be okay. This is crazy, but I'm going to be okay. And I remember getting on the bunk bed that night and I'm looking up at the USP and it's all those places all lit up. And I think, my God, I'm finally here. After all this time, after these 6 years, I have arrived in this bunk bed in A2 in Leavenworth prison. I thought, what am I going to do? And I jumped out of the bunk bed and there was a bathroom light that was coming through. I got a piece of paper they had given me and a pen. I started writing down what I want to accomplish in prison. Sounds crazy, but it really helped me feel grounded back to me. This is what I do. I write my stuff out and I started knocking down those things as I went through prison. And as I got through my prison sentence, I had actually knocked through all those things. And I'd rewritten some of them, but they helped me. The thing about losing yourself or getting institutionalized, what happens is if people fall into these bad routines, that becomes their comfort, especially in prison. How many times have all of you guys that have been to prison, you found somebody that caught an extra charge or put hands on a guard or whatever because they got close to the door and they were afraid of freedom more than they were afraid of prison. They were more comfortable with being in their ugly routine than taking their shot at getting out. It's crazy to think, but when I got out, I started seeing that a lot of people are institutionalized outside. You know, it's a bad marriage, it's a bad job, it's a bad, you know, health crisis, it's a bad childhood, whatever those things are. They put shackles on us to the point, well, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can do that. I saw a thing today that really disturbed me, but it was so strange that I saw it today because it's one of my examples for don't give in, don't give up. There was a thing on Instagram where they let this bear out of its cage and the bear had gone back to the wild and they came back to look and the bear had been walking in a circle at the same size of the cage. It wasn't using its freedom that they released it to. It was doing the same cage circle it had done at the zoo. What an analogy that is. Because if we allow ourselves to be shackled into what has happened to us and we don't break free when we get free, that can be and I don't remember who said this, but I picked it up, is the ugly comfort routine becomes the warden to your freedom. You got to do everything you can to break out of that. Everything you can. And the one thing that they haven't done, and so many of us have talked about this, that I know on the White Collar Support Group, they didn't take our brain. They take our brain, and whatever we did in the past, we can still use the brain to break through the barriers, the things that scare us, the things that we think we can't do. If as long as we walk through, we can break through them because they didn't take our brain. So I guess the message is that you can survive your worst fear, even if it scares the hell out of you. We find out that we can pretty much adapt to anything. And I want to say that this white collar support group, the speaker series, means so much to me, and for me to be a part of it, uh, it connects a lot of dots for me that I've been able to become part of something that is very much my community. So I appreciate the opportunity very much. Thank you.
Brent, that was sensational. What a message, and what a powerful example you are to all of us and for all of us. I just want to say two things before we open it up. If you'd like to share or ask Brent a question, please put your name in chat and I'll call on you. Please keep your comments to 2 minutes. We have a lot of people on, and I'm sure a lot of questions or a lot of shared experiences that we want to share with each other. The first thing I want to say is that Brent is going to be the keynote speaker at the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners National Convention in June. And so I didn't want to tell you in advance, but we've been all kind of his guinea pigs. So, we're going to give you
I appreciate that.
We're going to give you a 9.8 on this one, Brent. You did pretty darn well. Really happy for you. And the second thing is I'm going to ask the first question, and then we'll go to names in chat, because in your story I've heard so many business person's story where you're trying to get out of a jam and it's civil. Got lawyers involved and accountants involved and whoever you have involved. But did anyone tell you during that time period before the criminal piece started, did anyone tell you that this could wind up being a criminal matter? And if not, do you know why not? And if so, were you able to prepare for that eventuality?
Good question. No. And the strange thing is that I remember distinctly when we were sitting at a table with my attorney that was the trustee of our trust, and our in-house counsel. And Howard said, it's not a big deal. This is when we were having this big story coming out in the paper. Our companies were the NPS and the insurance companies could go into receivership. And he said, no, he said, this isn't a big deal. He said, we'll lose this, but we've got the medical malpractice insurance company, and we'll come out and we'll survive. And my in-house counsel, Katie, said, I'm getting a criminal defense attorney. And I looked at her and I said, why? She said, because Brent, this can get really ugly. And it was the first time that it hit me that, oh my gosh, this is going to be a ride that I didn't plan, that and it had been ugly from the part of going to all the, insurance departments and that, but at that time it felt civil. But that was the moment I felt like that the world had gone black.
Thanks, Brent. First is Bill, then Maria.
Brent, thank you so much. That was awesome. You had me mesmerized.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, there's so many things that sounded familiar to me. Especially the part about, only I can fix this. I can do this. And have you really, I know I have, but have you reflected on what it was that made you feel like you were the only person that could fix this, or that you had to? And what was it that maybe drove you to do that, as opposed to just letting the chips fall where they may? Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, Bill, that is such a great question, because I still struggle with that. My wife, Julie, tells me when I'm trying to get in and solve things that I shouldn't be trying to solve. And, at the time that I had all that happen, things had gone so good for me. You know, I was on a winning streak, and I just felt like, you know, if they can just listen and I can get in a room, I can talk to them. We'll figure it out. You know, we might not get everything we want, but we'll get it solved. And it was naive, obviously. You know, the other thing is that at the time that I went in, you know, talking about the house being on fire and the regulatory things, I should have taken more into account of just how big that was. I mean, you get into the regulatory world with the insurance departments and stuff, it gets real dicey. And but at 40 years old and thinking I had the world by the tail, I wanted to do it. I wanted to be the savior. And I have learned through this experience that I can't solve everything. I know kind of what I'm good at and what I shouldn't be messing around with. And I constantly have to evaluate, you know, that I'm following that rule.
Thank you, Bill. Up next is Maria, then Greg.
Hi, Brent. I am so honored to have the opportunity to talk to you. I listen to your podcast every week.
Oh, thank you,
And
Maria.
actually, I have to say, Father Joe's was by far my favorite.
It's so good.
But Bill's was also good. So Bill and Craig was also good, and Jeff. But anyways, I'm I'm partnering with Jackie and Evolution Reentry, and we are planning to do a support group in Spanish, since I am bilingual. And one of our in our plans, because there's nothing for the Spanish community, especially for women, there's nothing like we have right now. This is a luxury for us to have this group, but there's nothing in Spanish. My question to you is, we want to do a podcast as well. So I would like to get from you two good advice, ideas of how we can start this podcast in Spanish that will be as successful as yours. If you don't mind to share that with me.
Brent,
Oh gosh, yeah, I would love to talk to you about that.
Brent, why don't we send Maria your contact information?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, Maria, I'll text you Brent's contact information, and you two can talk about that. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Maria. Up next is Greg, then Gina.
Yeah, Brent, thanks for sharing. That was I was mesmerized. I could have listened for hours. Your storytelling capabilities are second to none. I need to start listening to your podcast. There were so many things as you were talking that just, you know, as I go through this journey, there's times where I think I'm over things, and then I hear something. And there was a couple things you said about, you know, getting in the car, and the thoughts that were going through your head, and it brings back literally some old wounds for me. But I know that's the healing process. And as hard as it is to hear, it's good to hear, because I know that burying this away is not the way to deal with it. The way to deal with it is to express. And the way you expressed yourself tonight was just phenomenal. So thank you for sharing. And I hope anyone who's, you know, about to go in or is facing that really takes to heart what you said tonight, because that, you know, you're living proof that this is not the end of the story. This is the middle or even the beginning of a story. So thank you for sharing. And I love your De Wataneo analogy. My personal one was Castaway.
Perfect.
If you ever listened to the end of that movie, listen to Tom Hanks.
So the Wilson, the ball.
Talk about isolation. He wasn't in prison, but he may as well have been. It's amazing how those words and that picture can get you through things you didn't think you could get through. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Greg. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Greg. I love this, Brent. Everyone loves your podcast where you do 98% listening and 2% talking. It's perfect. Let's see. Up next is Gina, then Linda.
Hi, Brent. How are you?
Hi, Gina.
So when I read that it was going to be, your five hints, like I've listened to pretty much every single one of your podcasts. So I'm like, I know what, number 3 is, number 4. So I appreciate you kind of sharing those in a list. And my favorite is, and always has been, is the calendar idea. I mean, that's how I've gotten through this pre-trial. Is last week, oh my God, I was a total mess. I mean, the girls on here know I was like leading the meeting and they were like, Gina, we need to talk about you today. Like, so, I had to let myself have a bad day and just feel the feels. But what I wanted to share as well is today I was doing my yoga teacher training with Prison Yoga Project, and we had a guest speaker, and her message was healing happens in community. And it just blew my mind up because, my first stop was a 12-step program, and I found a community there. And then a month later, I found the Justice Impacted community. And I think that's why I encourage people all the time to like join the meetings, get involved, do something. Don't just sit at home alone because you'll end up in the garage, right? Like with the keys in your hand. I mean, it's
Right.
true.
Yeah.
It's we have new members and I tell them, go listen to Brent's podcast, start streaming them, because that's going to show you that there's life after prison. Like all these comeback stories, like Walt told you, nobody wants to hear your miserable story. They want to hear, everybody loves a comeback. And, so you just share such a great message. And then my question is, how long from your release to when you started Nightmare Success podcast?
Good question. I didn't do anything until I got off of probation. I had a 3-year probation. So I started writing the book. I think it was 2 years after I was out. And I got off probation of, I think, 2020. And I released the book later that year. And the podcast was born out of that. I remember walking the dogs with Julie. I said, I think I'm going to do a podcast. He said, oh gosh, Brent, what are you going to do? And I said, I think I'm going to talk to people about their story of being in prison and what they were doing before prison, while they went to prison and after prison, and how they survived, and make it a hope podcast. I wish I could say I had that one planned, the podcast, but it was really just being on other people's podcasts promoting the book. And I started thinking that maybe we could create a platform for people to tell their stories. And it's funny because the book is something that's kind of in the background now, and the passion of mine is the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Who's next on here? Linda? Linda. Linda, you're on mute.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Perfect, Linda.
Okay. First of all, Brent, great job. I also enjoy your podcast. That shouldn't be any surprise. Okay. I am curious. It was a family business. And in my case, on a very much smaller scale, my issues were also family business related. And I found that my co-defendant, who was my sister, came out with a totally different look on everything. Did you find that members of your family came out? You did have somebody else that was also in prison, right?
My dad, yeah.
Yeah. Did he come out with a totally different perspective than you, or did you guys pretty much, were you on the same page?
That's a deep one. I don't know. I'm not sure if I know the answer to that. It's so interesting because of the fact that in a family, all the family members go through the stuff not the same. You know, they handle it differently than, it's not all the same. And, you know, Dad, I think, carried an extra burden with the fact that he'd been through this twice. His son was in it. And I don't know that Dad was ever going to shake that weight. He lost, you know, a 48-year marriage with Mom. So, I don't know. He was always very positive, but I don't know that, I don't know how he died three months after he got out. So I don't know what his journey would have been when he got home.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
In my case, it imploded my family, but you know, there's been a lot of positives too.
Yeah.
And I will say, I recently went on a job interview, which I got the job, and my line was that I may have been in prison, but I didn't lose my brain, and it worked.
That's so good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Up next is Perry, then Craig.
Hey, Perry, I just discovered you from the email that went out about you speaking tonight, and yeah, Googling you was really interesting to discover this body of work that you had done. So before I forget, my line is get
That
busy.
scares me when people say they Google you. Gives me PTSD.
I do a lot of genealogy research. Actually, I'm working on a doc concept, genealogy of recovery. Actually, tomorrow will be 45 years ago. I walked out of prison when I was 21 years old, and I had served 3 years of an 8-year sentence for an $8 armed robbery.
Wow.
And, I was definitely a rebel without a clue. And so in Shawshank Redemption, my favorite line was get busy.
Get busy living or get busy dying.
Yeah, that's my line. So my curiosity is the 6 feet under that's mentioned in your bio as a doc. Yeah, can you share? I tried to Google that. I couldn't find it.
So what happened was on that, there was HBO we bought Hollywood Forever Cemetery. We put the forever on it when we got it out of bankruptcy.
Okay.
And because we were doing such a unique thing, and it just so happened we're bringing the cemetery back to life, and we were in the technology side of this. So it just kind of all, HBO came calling and wanted to do this documentary. And my brother's really the one that was a big part of it. And in Hollywood was really his love of that cemetery. It really wasn't mine when we all in this family business. I wanted to do a deal over at Rose Hill Cemetery, which was a whole another thing. But he wanted that as a passion project, and it became something pretty legendary, what they've been able to do in the last 20 years. But that documentary, The Young and the Dead, Alan Ball had just kind of come off his big deal with Best Picture and whatever else, and he was looking for a series for HBO. And so he contacted the guys that did the documentary of The Young and the Dead, and then he met with us over in Hollywood, and he thought, I'm just going to do so. And the thing about it is, those people really aren't us, but there's pieces of it that are. They never knew what to do with my dad because they always said that he was this guy, this grand, they thought he was like a puppet master. So they killed him in the first scene. And so he comes back as a ghost to give us advice all the time.
Right.
But Alan Ball just basically took something and said, we're going to take funerals and make it a series of, these are what people are, and they've never been done, people in the funeral business. So it was pieces of us. And if there hadn't been The Young and the Dead, it would have never have happened, I don't think.
So were you a fan of the show? Because there was this one episode, I think they jumped the shark in the last season. I kind of lost it, but I followed it all the way up. But there was one episode where the one son character that plays Dexter later on, how he's carjacked by a crack addict. And there's this back and forth where they switch off having the power of the gun or the knife or whatever. And it was just and I'm thinking about it, I'm chilled again, just thinking about it. It was the most chilling, realistic sort of crime situation that was so mixed with conflict and compassion and hope and disturbing other energies, because it ended with him being drenched in gasoline and a match held, which wasn't dropped. And do you even know that scene I'm talking about?
Yeah, and my brother actually was he was a guest writer on numerous episodes. So
Okay.
I don't believe that he was involved with that episode, but he was involved with numerous scenes and numerous seasons.
Okay.
Thank
Cool.
you.
I think there were 6 seasons.
Keep paying it forward, man. That's what
Thank
you're
you.
doing. It's good stuff.
Thanks.
Barry. Craig, then Laura, then Keith.
Brent, that was absolutely incredible. Phenomenal storyteller. You were going to completely light it up at the ACFE conference. And I think what's so interesting is it'd be interesting if we could keep almost like a running tab of the parallels that so many of us have in our stories. One in particular for me was when you said, we'll just sit down and sort this out. You know, I actually got the voicemail from the FBI because they didn't realize I was home. So I had an hour to drive from Manhattan to Connecticut. And on the drive home, I'll never forget. I'm like, we'll sit down, we'll have some coffee, we'll figure this all out. It's just a big misunderstanding. But I think it would be so funny just to, because I feel like on our Monday night calls and on these Tuesday night speaker series calls, there are just parallel thinking. And it'd be funny to keep a running tab of that. I don't know how we would do it, but I do have a question for you. And it might be a little challenging one. You are going to be presenting at the ACFE National Conference very shortly. And historically, on the national level, the ACFE does not pay fraudsters.
Mhm.
And there is a lot of tension around that topic because there's a lot of tension around people who committed fraud. And I've always had good luck with the ACFE, but there are always a few people who push back. And I'm curious because you're going to have such a huge stage, not necessarily that you're going to change minds, but what are a couple of things that you would like those people to think about differently when it comes to somebody who has committed fraud in the past?
That's a great question because you're so right, Greg, about that whole thing of, I don't even like the term fraudster, but you know, that's what they use. You know, I think, and I was talking to Walt about this too, because he's spoken at that, on that stage. And I think, you know, talking back and forth about that is the biggest thing is that you want them to see you as a person, not as these people in a file that they go and they, you know, do the examinations, but there's people behind those files. There's lives behind those files. There's stories. And that we're people who, yes, we got caught up in this deal that we carry this title of felon or fraudster or whatever they want to call us, but that we're people with a story that hopefully in the end of it, that they can relate to, that they don't see themselves as somebody that they can't relate to us because they didn't go to prison, but they can relate to us because we've experienced something that could be somewhat similar in their world. And I hope that's something that could come out of it.
Thanks.
That's awesome. And I agree with you. I don't like the term fraudster either. And one of these days I will have a conversation with John Gill about that.
Thank you, Craig. And by the way, Craig, I did have that conversation with John Gill, and maybe that's why I haven't been invited to be the speaker at the one. At any rate, Laura, then Keith.
Good evening. Thank you, Brent, for sharing your story. My
Laura.
first introduction to your podcast was Drew's podcast. It was great.
It is
And
great.
I look forward to seeing more of them. I wanted to ask you, being a mom of 2 kids, You mentioned being a kid yourself, going through the situation of having your father share some very difficult news with you. In thinking back and how you talk to your girls, did you have or use some of the things that your father said, or how did you present the situation to your kiddos, or do you have tips for those of us with kids who are going to be facing similar situation?
How old are your kids, Laura?
13 and 12.
Okay. So my kids were teenagers and one was in college. Actually, both of them were in college by the time my youngest was in high school. Julie's here and when she, still on. We were very open about what we were going through. And there was no way to hide what we were going through because it was so public. I think one thing that we decided is that we were going to band together as a unit and we were going to kind of block out all the craziness that was in the news and those things. It's interesting how it all unraveled or unrolled out. As it rolled out, my kids had a lot of support. People in high school and can be very mean. And my youngest daughter is a teacher, a high school teacher now, and a tennis coach. And one of the reasons she went into teaching is how supportive her teacher was to her through this experience that she was going through. And, my heart goes out to kids that have to go through it because, it's how they, have to deal with that. There's no book written on it. The only thing I can say is that Julie and I were very, very open to them about what we were doing, what we were going through, how we were handling it, if they had any suggestions, and we handled it as a family. My parents, on the other hand, tended to more hide the overall piece of it. And I felt more shame when we moved to St. Louis that we were hiding out, that we were trying to keep it away from people to find out. And for me as a kid, that felt like an extra burden. I remember going to high school and I only had one other friend that knew about it because his family had been shot up with the Michaels and the Giordanos and this crazy mafia thing. And we found kind of common ground, but it was a weird thing to go through as a kid, being in a new environment, no one knowing, and you just dropped your dad off at prison today. So I don't know, Julie, if you have anything that you want to share with it, but it was tough. Julie and I talked about it a lot, but I think being the more open with them, they can take, and if they feel like they're a part of it, then they can also feel like they can lean on you. The more that I think is kept out of it, then I think they're afraid to uncover something that might really scare them.
Thank you for that advice. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brent. Well, Julie, you've been shouted out, so you can turn it down if you want. You don't have to speak. It's up to you. You're on mute.
You're on mute, babe. You went off? No, you're good. Okay.
Good. Okay. I don't blame you, Julie. Let's see. Laura, let's see who's next. Keith is next, and then we'll wrap it up. So Keith, you're our last question sharer.
Okay. Last but not least, I like to say. So Brent, thank you so much. I've heard your story before, and you are such a good storyteller that the rerun was great too. So
thanks, Keith.
So the question I have, I have two boys, both grown, and one was 24 at the time, the other was 30. And we all rallied together initially. And as time went on, the problems that reared their ugly head post-arrest really went back to prior to my arrest. All the things that were ignored by my kids. I have one son, my youngest son, hasn't spoken to me in a year. And that's just another problem. I don't want to, sit here and talk about all my problems, but did you find that your girls, were they all in a different place regarding, was there anger? Was one more angry than the other? Or were they all just, accepting? Did they really, they were much younger than my kids. They were well, not much younger, but certainly, I'm sure they had, you know, differing thoughts and feelings, even if they were all behind you.
They did. I mean, I think the really cool thing about my girls is they're so close, and they, you know, the conversations that they probably had with each other were conversations that I wasn't part of. But I think that one of the things that got us through, and I've said this before with my girls, Julie was such a great role model on how to handle a crisis and how to, you know, handle this unbelievable surge of a tsunami that happened on us, that I think my girls really took a lead from them and thought, if mom's doing good with this and she's handling this, then, you know, they kind of figured out, okay, I'm going to be able to handle this. And, because Julie went from, you know, not working to, you know, having a job and having all this stuff that was, it changed everybody's world. Anger, I think the anger was when we got to the point of what I was going to do with the trial or pleading. I know I remember it was, I think Carly that said, Dad, I'd never forgive you if you walked into a courtroom because we'd lose you forever. So I do remember that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Keith. And
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. What a wonderful evening. Just a few announcements before we wrap up, and I say thanks to Brent. Reminder, everyone, our white collar support group is on Monday night, 7:00 Eastern, 4:00 Pacific. It's on Zoom. You can find out information at prisonist.org. And there's a contact page there, and we will get back to you right away. So either you or someone you know or love, please refer them. On April 2nd is Jason Bowles is our speaker, the criminal defense attorney for Rust Armor Hannah Gutierrez. On April 16th is former Governor Jim McGreevey, Michelle Weinstein Miller. May 14th. And I want to thank our guest speaker tonight, Brent Cassity. Brent, you were wonderful. And Julie, thank you, Brent's beautiful wife, Julie, for hanging in there. And now you know what Brent does on Monday nights. And feel free to email me or text me and let us know right or wrong. So, Brent, thank you. What a beautiful evening. And you were
Appreciate it.
So generous with your story and your time. All right, everybody, join us Monday night. Reach out to one another. Blessings to everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thanks,
Hey,
everybody. Appreciate it.
Brent, great job, buddy.
Thanks, Bill.
Great job.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Brent.
Thanks, Brent.